Drink my blood, human. Or die.
The freighter drifted through the endless dark, its hull groaning as if it hated the silence as much as the man inside. Carter sat hunched in the pilot's chair, hands stained with grease, eyes rimmed red from another sleepless cycle. The ship was barely holding together. Patched plates, flickering lights, the faint hiss of a life support system that had been running far longer than it was ever designed to. He called it home, but it was more of a prison. A cage of rusted steel floating in a sea of stars. Carter had long stopped hoping for company. Out here, at the edge of mapped space, there were no voices on the comm, only static. No one cared where he went, no one cared if he returned. Earth was a distant memory, a place that had forgotten him as easily as he had learned to forget it. His work was simple, brutal, and thankless. Hunt for wrecks, strip them down, sell the scrap to traders who paid just enough to keep him alive. Some days he wondered if survival was even worth the effort. Loneliness pressed on him harder than the vacuum outside. But when his scanner pinged sharp, clear, not the false alarms he was used to, his heart skipped a beat. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the display. Something massive drifted in the void ahead, cold and ancient. Its silhouette was jagged, torn apart by centuries of impact. It was not human. The design was unlike any ship he had seen before, as if it had been built for another kind of life entirely. Excitement flickered inside him, thin but sharp. Maybe this was the break he needed. Maybe inside there would be tech no one had touched, alloys worth more than his rusted freighter. He guided his ship closer, the engines whining, until the derelict filled his viewport. Its surface was etched with strange markings, runes carved deep into the black metal. They glowed faintly, like embers that refused to die. Carter swallowed hard. Something about the sight made his skin crawl, but he pressed on. He had no choice. Survival left no room for fear. The docking clamps groaned as they latched onto the derelict's side. He suited up, sealed his helmet, and stepped into the cold airlock. His boots clanged against alien metal as he crossed into the dead ship. The air was thin, stale, biting cold. His helmet light cut across the walls, revealing more of those glowing lines, pulsing faintly as if alive. The corridors were silent, their architecture curving in strange, organic patterns, nothing like the utilitarian angles of human ships. He drifted through the husk, his breath loud in his ears, until he found it. At the heart of the derelict, behind a warped bulkhead, stood something that made him stop breathing for a moment. Coffin. At least it looked like one. It was taller than him, carved from the same black metal, its surface alive with faint red light that pulsed in rhythm like a heartbeat. Every instinct told him to turn around, to leave, to seal the airlock and burn away before this ship decided to wake up. But survival clawed louder than instinct. He needed something, anything. He pressed his gloved hands against the coffin's surface. It thrummed under his touch, warm despite the freezing air. He hesitated, jaw tight, then found the release mechanism. It hissed when he pulled it, releasing a fog of cold vapor. The lid opened. Inside was not metal, not wires, not anything that belonged in a salvage haul. Inside was a girl. No, something more than a girl. Her skin was pale blue, almost luminous under his light. Her hair was long and black, spreading around her like strands of ink floating in water. And her eyes snapped open, glowing crimson like fire breaking through the dark. Carter staggered back, his heart slamming in his chest. The coffin was not empty. It was a prison, and the prisoner was awake. Her eyes locked onto him with a hunger that made his skin crawl. For a second she looked fragile, her limbs trembling, her lips pale as if she had not breathed in centuries. But when Carter stepped back, her hand shot out with a speed that blurred. Fingers like iron clamped around his wrist, and he felt the crushing strength of something far stronger than human. Her lips parted. Her voice was a whisper, but it carried through the dead ship like thunder. "Drink my blood, human, or die." The words froze him where he stood. His breath came hard inside his helmet. He tried to pull back, but her grip tightened, the pressure making his bones ache. Her crimson eyes bore into him, glowing brighter with every passing second. Carter's instincts screamed at him to fight, to wrench free, to run. But he was trapped in a dead alien wreck, tethered to a failing freighter with oxygen dwindling. And there was something in her voice, something desperate beneath the command. Not just threat, need. His throat went dry. What are you? His voice cracked inside his helmet, too small in the endless dark. Her head tilted, hair flowing like smoke, and for the first time he noticed how weak she looked beneath the strength. Her skin shimmered faintly, her breaths shallow. She was starving, but not for food. I am Lyssara, she whispered, the syllables strange yet sharp. Her grip trembled as if even holding him was costing her. Without the bond, I will fade. Without me, your ship will die. Carter's heart slammed against his ribs. He thought of his freighter, leaking oxygen, systems failing, hull ready to split apart with the next storm of debris. He thought of dying alone in the void, bones adrift where no one would ever find them. And then he thought of her. Those eyes, that voice, a predator's strength wrapped in a body that looked like carved starlight. She was terrifying, yes, but she was alive. And she was offering him something he had not felt in years, connection. His stomach turned. You want me to drink your blood? Her lips curved in a faint, desperate smile. It is the only way. The words cut through him like a blade. Every instinct told him it was madness. But every second he hesitated. Her grip weakened. Her glow dimmed. She was not bluffing. If she died, so did his last chance. Carter shut his eyes, teeth clenched, and gave the smallest nod. Her crimson gaze flared. She moved fast, pulling his wrist to her lips. He braced for pain, for the tearing of flesh, but instead her teeth slid against his skin with a precision that chilled him. Two fangs pierced deep, and fire erupted in his veins. It was not just pain. It was fire and ice together, flooding through his arm, racing into his chest, burning through his lungs, his heart, his skull. His knees buckled, his vision blurred with light. He felt her pulse, her life, crash into his like a tidal wave. His gasp echoed in his helmet as his blood spilled into her mouth, and something impossible snapped into place. A bond, a tether, a second heartbeat thrumming inside him, not his own. She released him slowly, her lips stained dark, her breath sharp and fast. Color returned to her cheeks, her eyes blazing like coals stoked back to life. For the first time since she opened her eyes, she did not look like a ghost. She looked alive. And Carter felt her inside him. Not just the pain, not just the weakness. A thread. A connection he could not cut, even if he wanted to. His voice trembled as he whispered the only words that came. What have you done to me? Lyssara's gaze softened. Her grip on his wrist turned gentle, her fingers trailing down his skin as if she already claimed it as her own. I have bound you to me, she said quietly, almost tender now. And now, human, if I die, so will you. The derelict groaned around them, ancient metal shifting. And for the first time in years, Carter's heart beat not for survival, but for something terrifyingly alive. Carter staggered back against the alien wall, his pulse racing too fast, too loud. He pressed his hand to his chest, certain his heart was about to rip itself free. But then he realized something impossible. There was another rhythm beneath it, a second pulse, steady and strong, not his own. He looked at her, still catching her breath, her crimson eyes now glowing with renewed strength. She stood taller, her posture regal, her long black hair flowing down her back as if gravity itself bent for her. Princess, a queen, something that did not belong in the wreck of a ship lost to time. His mouth was dry. What are you? She tilted her head, studying him as though weighing his worth. I was a bride, she said finally, her voice smooth and sharp as glass. Promised to bind empires together, a sacrifice dressed as royalty. But I refused. For that rebellion, they cast me into exile, entombed me here, to fade in silence. Carter's throat tightened. He glanced at the coffin behind her, its glow dying now that it had released its prisoner. Prison disguised as a tomb. A punishment meant to erase her from existence. Why me? His voice cracked. Why pull me into this? Her gaze softened in a way that unsettled him more than her strength. Because the void chose you, you opened my prison. And now your blood carries mine. Our fates are bound. Carter of Earth. He froze when she said his name. She should not have known it. Yet the bond pulsed between them, whispering truths they had not spoken. He could feel her heartbeat, her hunger, her exhaustion. And she could feel his fear. Lyssara stepped closer. Her presence filled the corridor, luminous and overwhelming. If I die, you die. If you suffer, I suffer. You are mine now, and I am yours. The words sank deep into him, heavier than chains. He wanted to deny it, to push her away, but when her hand rose and brushed against his chest, he could not move. Her palm rested over his heart, and her crimson eyes softened again, this time with something almost tender. This heartbeat, she whispered, is louder than the void. Carter swallowed hard, his body trembling from the bond. He tried to focus on survival, on reason, but every time she leaned closer, every time her eyes lingered on him too long, he felt his resolve crack. In the silence of his freighter, after they returned from the derelict, she lay across the narrow bunk, her pale form draped in shadows. The bond gnawed at her, pulling her toward him, and when hunger returned, she did not command. She asked. Her lips grazed his wrist, her breath warm, and Carter felt the intimacy of survival blur into something else. Her feeding was slow, almost gentle. Each draw of blood left him lightheaded, yet every touch of her hand steadied him. Every whisper of thanks filled a void he had lived with for years. He hated himself for noticing the curve of her silhouette under the dim lights, for noticing the way her eyes glowed softer when she pulled away, lips stained with his blood. She was not just a predator. She was something far more dangerous, beautiful. Carter tried to bury the thought, but the bond betrayed him. She felt his racing heartbeat, the quickening of his breath, the conflict inside him. And she smiled faintly as if she knew. The silence between them stretched long, fragile, but it shattered when his comm unit crackled for the first time in years. A voice cut through the static, harsh and cold. Attention, scavenger ship. This is the oath sworn. The exile has awakened. Kill the human. Bring the bride alive. Carter's blood ran cold. Lyssara's eyes narrowed, her fangs glinting in the low light. The void was no longer silent, and now it was hunting them. The message echoed through the freighter, its cold command sinking into Carter's bones. He stood frozen at the controls, staring at the blinking red light of the incoming signal. Kill the human. Bring the bride alive. His jaw clenched. Whoever these hunters were, they knew exactly who Lyssara was, and they wanted her badly enough to kill him without hesitation. Behind him, she moved with a quiet grace that made the ship's cramped quarters feel even smaller. Her crimson eyes burned, sharp and furious. They should not have found us so quickly, she said, her voice low, dangerous. The bond has stirred the air. My enemies feel the pulse of my return. Carter's fingers danced over the console, coaxing life out of his failing engines. Enemies? His voice was a rasp. How many? Too many, she admitted. Her hand slid across the back of his chair, steadying herself as the ship rumbled awake. They are mercenaries, oath-bound to the empire that entombed me. They will not stop until I am caged again. Carter's throat tightened. He had no army, no allies, no weapon stronger than a pair of rusting cannons bolted to the side of his freighter. Against mercenaries, they would be dust in the wind. But when Lyssara's hand touched his shoulder, a strange calm cut through his fear. Her grip was steady, certain. You are not alone anymore, Carter of Earth. Fight, and I will fight with you. The scanners lit up with movement. A trio of ships appeared from the void, sleek and armed, their engines glowing like predators' eyes. The first shots lanced through the darkness, energy beams scorching past his hull. Carter yanked the controls, his freighter groaning in protest as it dived toward the asteroid belt ahead. The chase began. The ship rattled and screamed as debris whirled around them. Carter flew with grit carved from years of scraping through wrecks and storms, weaving between tumbling rock and jagged shards of ice. Every second alive was stolen from death itself. But Lyssara was no passenger. She moved through the ship like she had always belonged there, her presence filling every shadow. When one mercenary vessel clipped close, she appeared beside him, her hand on the console. The bond pulsed, and somehow the ship responded sharper, faster, as if her will sharpened his reflexes. When the mercenaries forced them into a derelict station, Carter grabbed the old rifle from his rack, ready to make his last stand. But Lyssara stopped him with a look. Her eyes glowed, her fangs bared, and when the boarding clamps latched onto their hull, she stepped forward like a queen reclaiming her throne. The mercenaries stormed inside, armored and armed, but they were not ready for her. Lyssara moved like a storm given flesh. Her claws raked through armor, her speed a blur in the shadows, her voice a hiss that froze men in their boots. She was terrifying, elegant, and beautiful all at once. Carter fought with his rifle, gritting his teeth, ducking between corridors, firing shot after shot. He was not graceful. He was not perfect. But every time he faltered, Lyssara was there, cutting down the enemy with a fury that left him breathless. After the last body fell, Carter leaned against the bulkhead, sweat dripping down his brow. His arms trembled from exhaustion. Lyssara approached slowly, her movements suddenly softer, her regal air fading into something more fragile. She touched his arm, her fingers brushing his skin with reverence. "You bleed," she whispered, her crimson eyes flicking down to the wound on his shoulder. "I always bleed," Carter muttered, but his voice broke when she leaned closer, pressing her forehead lightly against his. The bond thrummed between them, her strength and his pain intertwining. She whispered something in her native tongue, a sound like starlight breaking, before speaking in his again. "You endure. Even broken, even hunted, you endure." Carter swallowed hard, his throat thick. For the first time in years, he did not feel like a ghost drifting through an endless night. He felt alive, alive because of her. But the scanners screamed again. More ships. Dozens. The void was filling with hunters. Lyssara's crimson eyes hardened as she turned toward the viewport. "They will not stop. Not until the last of us burns." And Carter realized the truth. He was no longer running from death for himself. He was running for both of them. The chase dragged them across asteroid fields, through collapsing stations, through ambushes where every second could have been their last. Yet somehow, through fire and blood, they survived. Carter patched her wounds with trembling hands. She pressed her palm against his chest at night, listening to his heartbeat as though it anchored her. In the silence between battles, he caught her laughing once. Soft, surprised, a sound so human it made him ache. He never thought laughter would return to his ship. For the first time, Carter felt like he was not just surviving. He was living. But survival was temporary. On the horizon of their flight loomed a derelict star fortress, its massive bulk drifting lifeless among shattered moons. Their ship was crippled, their oxygen bleeding out, and mercenary vessels closed in from all sides. Carter gripped the controls, sweat stinging his eyes, his heart thundering. There was nowhere left to run. They were cornered. The star fortress loomed ahead, a corpse of metal floating in the void. Its towers were broken, its hull torn open to the cold, but its vast size gave Carter one last chance to hide. He forced his failing freighter inside, scraping metal against ancient walls as he crashed into the hangar. Sparks rained, alarms screamed, but they were alive. For now. Lyssara stood beside him, silent, her crimson eyes fixed on the viewport. Beyond the fortress, dozens of enemy ships tightened their net. Their lights blinked in unison like the eyes of predators ready to strike. Carter grabbed his rifle, his hands trembling. He could hear the bond thrumming inside him, echoing with Lyssara's calm, steady pulse. She was not afraid, but he was. He had always been afraid, of dying alone, of living empty, of meaning nothing. Now, for the first time, he was afraid of something else. Leaving her behind. He turned to her, jaw tight. When they break through, you run. Take the ship. Take anything. Just do not stop until you are free. Her gaze snapped to him, sharp as a blade. You would sacrifice yourself? Carter forced a hollow smile. That was the plan the moment I picked up your coffin. For a long moment she said nothing. The fortress groaned around them, the hum of approaching engines filling the air. Then Lyssara moved. She stepped close enough that he could feel the cold heat of her breath, close enough that her eyes consumed his vision. Her hands framed his face, cool and strong, forcing him to look only at her. You are a fool, she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time. A broken scavenger who thinks his life has no worth. And yet you gave me yours. Her lips parted, her fangs glinting, and her voice sharpened with fire. Then hear me, Carter of Earth. You are not my shield. You are not my prison keeper. You are my chosen, my mate, my husband. The words hit him like a strike to the chest. His breath caught, the bond flaring inside him with a heat that burned through every nerve. His pulse matched hers, no longer separate, no longer foreign. One. The hangar doors shattered as mercenaries flooded in. Their boots thundered against the deck, their weapons raised. Energy bolts streaked through the air, lighting the ruins in fire. Lyssara did not let go of him. She turned toward their enemies, her voice rising above the storm, regal and furious. This human is mine. To take him, you must take me. The bond ignited. Carter felt it rush through him, his veins filled with strength that was not his alone. His limbs steadied, his vision sharpened. His fear melted into fire. He raised his rifle and Lyssara bared her claws. Together they moved. The battle was chaos, fire and steel clashing in the hollow corpse of the fortress. Carter fought with raw grit, every shot precise, every step guided by survival's edge. Lyssara was a storm at his side, her movements blurring, her strikes tearing through armor like paper. Where he faltered, she surged. Where she weakened, he held. The mercenaries fell in waves, but more came, shouting oaths in languages Carter did not know, their numbers endless. Yet the bond held them up, human endurance fused with alien fury, two heartbeats hammering as one. An explosion ripped through the hangar, flames swallowing the wreckage. Carter dove, shielding Lyssara with his body, the heat searing across his skin. He felt pain tear through him, blood spilling hot and heavy. His knees gave way, his rifle clattering against the floor. Carter! Lyssara's scream cut through the fire. She caught him as he fell, her arms cradling him with a desperation that shattered her regal calm. Her crimson eyes blazed wet with fury and something deeper. He coughed, blood staining his lips, his vision fading. Told you, this was the plan. Her grip tightened, shaking. No, no more sacrifices. You are mine. Do you hear me? Mine. Around them, the last of the mercenaries hesitated, unnerved by the sight of her clutching him as if the bond itself had cracked open her soul. Then her gaze lifted to them, burning with a wrath that made even hardened killers stumble. She rose with him in her arms, her voice cutting like a blade. He bleeds for me, and for that you will all die. The bond erupted. Power surged from her, fire and shadow entwined, and the hunters fell back under a storm of wrath. Carter heard the screams, the crack of collapsing steel, the roar of destruction. But then everything dimmed, and the last thing he saw was Lyssara's face above his, fierce and broken, whispering his name as the fortress burned. Carter woke to silence. Not the hollow silence of the void, but the soft hum of his freighter's life support systems, running steady for the first time in years. His body ached, his wounds heavy, but he was alive. That alone felt impossible. He tried to sit up, but a hand pressed gently against his chest, keeping him still. Lyssara sat beside him, her pale blue skin bathed in the soft glow of the cabin lights. Her long black hair spilled over her shoulders, her crimson eyes no longer burning with fury but softened with relief. You are awake, she whispered. The words trembled, as though she had been holding her breath for hours. Carter swallowed, his throat dry. How did we survive? Her lips curved faintly. We did not survive. We endured. There is a difference. He looked at her then, really looked at her. She was regal, yes. Every movement graceful, every glance carrying the weight of centuries. But there was something else in her now. Something that had not been there when he first opened that coffin. Vulnerability. Hope. Her hands were careful as they adjusted the bandages on his shoulder. He realized, with a start, that every wound he bore had been treated with meticulous care. She had fought a war, cradled him through the fire, and then tended his broken body with a gentleness that hollowed his chest. Why? His voice cracked. Why save me when you could have run? Lyssara's crimson eyes met his, unwavering. Because you are mine, she said softly. Not as prey, not as shield, not as chain. Mine as I am yours. The bond may have begun with blood, but it endures because of choice. My choice. His heart hammered, the bond thrumming alive inside him. He thought of the coffin, of her whisper, drink or die. And now, here she was, no longer a prisoner, no longer a queen in exile, but something he had never dared imagine in the dark of his empty nights. A companion, partner, a reason. He tried to laugh, but it broke into a cough. You sound like you are proposing. She tilted her head, regal even in amusement. In my people's way, I already have. Do you accept? Carter stared at her, at the alien woman who had shattered his silence, who had dragged him from survival into something that felt dangerously close to living. Slowly, weakly, he reached for her hand. Her fingers curled around his, cool and certain. Yes, he whispered. For the first time since he had left Earth, Carter smiled. Lyssara rested her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes, her voice a breath against his ear. I never wanted a throne, she murmured. Never wanted to rule or to bind empires. I only wanted freedom. And now I want you. The words settled deep in his chest, heavier than chains, stronger than any vow. He let out a long breath, his hand resting against hers. For years, the void had been his prison, his grave waiting to happen. Now, with her beside him, the stars no longer looked empty. Outside, the wreckage of the star fortress drifted in silence. The hunters scattered. The empire cheated of its captive bride. The freighter, battered but alive, slipped into the dark beyond, two fugitives bound by blood and choice. As the stars stretched out before them, Carter closed his eyes, listening to the bond between their hearts. Two rhythms, one pulse, and the silence of space was broken by her whisper, soft and sure. He found me in a coffin drifting through the void, and gave me a reason to live.